Sure. So I'm Neil Gunning. I've been in technology and talent acquisition for 10 years. My total TA career spanning about 17 years, 17 and a half years. Had the horrible realization recently that more than half my life has now been in TA. It's a bit worrying. I've got the grey hairs to prove it. Yeah, generally enjoy doing scale up tech organizations. Being the builder of systems, processes, tooling, teams, etc., etc. And yeah, I've got the whirlwinds to prove that I've done it a few times now. It's in the early part of my career, it was always just about challenges. So the first half of my career, I guess, was in agency. Agency is a great training ground, I think, for building the fire in the belly and getting you used to pace and juggling 25 different things at any one time. Um, and then I just got to a point in my career where I wanted to build, you know, individual brands for individual organizations and build companies and be bought into that company. So the first leap into that was a smaller business, and it was a consulting tech business. And by the time I'd sort of solved the problems that they brought me on board to solve, I then sort of turned my attention to, okay, what's the next learning opportunity? What's the next challenge going to be for me? And it was going to a bigger, consulting tech business. And then after that, it was, okay, what's it like vendor sides? And then what's it like in a hyperscale vendor business? And then, so it was always just about different challenges, starting the journey from different phases of the build. Sometimes you'd be the first person in the door, and you're basically embedding everything. You're embedding all new processes, all new tools, all new everything. But sometimes you're having to take an organization on and learn and relearn when they already have a lot of things, but you just have to enhance it in order to take them to. So figuring out how to approach things differently based on when you're going in, size of business, objectives of the business, what you have available to you, and so on. So it's always been generally around taking on a new learning opportunity and a new challenge. Um, the best and the worst. Wow, that's a big question. The worst career advice was actually, and this is probably quite a personal one in relation to my style, but the worst career advice I ever had was like to play the game. You sometimes in organizations you get you can sometimes there's sometimes some passive politics or even just overt politics, and and I've been advised before to just be willing to play the game to make things work. And apart from the fact that that's just not my style, you sort of feel like you're cheapening what you're doing by doing that. If you're not just doing what you do in the way that you do it, of course, learning and always being willing to challenge how you do things, but doing it in the right way. So that was the worst advice I ever had. The best advice I ever had is that my directness, interestingly, it's sort of linked. So the best advice is probably that my directness is both a weakness and a strength, and I need to understand the balance of both. And that I need to understand and this is something that I learned super early on, or I was told super early on, that the willingness to call a spade, and the willingness to not sugarcoat and be willing to have the hard discussions is a great quality, but the the knowing how much to not sugarcoat was something that I had to learn early on, and it took a while to figure that out. So yeah, that's probably the best career advice, because it's something I've never not used, regardless of the organization, regardless of the phase of life. The understanding where the balance is, I guess, between diplomatically direct and direct. In early in your career, you're being told to do things via a process, or being told to do things via a predefined way of doing things. And when something inherently inside you is telling you that there's a better way of doing this, or there's a better way of engaging with someone, and not listening to that, like the one of the best lessons I learned all the way through my career was just the willingness to start trusting myself a little bit more, and trusting that if I think that I need to engage with someone differently or deal with something a bit differently, there's a reason for that. I just need to try and figure out and anchor that to something tangible, and then act on that. That was, I guess, a lot of it just comes down to trusting yourself and trusting your gut and trusting that your instincts and your intuition around something. Once you've gained a little bit of knowledge, I guess, and experience and so on, your intuition and your experience is really powerful, and that you need to not minimize that for the sake of following a process or following a system or following a framework. So it was, yeah, a lot of it just basically around trusting your gut, your instincts, and trusting yourself a little bit more. I'll probably give two different layers to this. I mean, let's talk like the kind of maybe a bit more tactical. Tactical is exactly the one that you just said there, and that's kind of where my brain was going. They're working harder instead of working smarter. Early on, the hours doesn't necessarily mean effectiveness. And sort of working yourself into an early grave because you're not taking that step back. Like taking 1 hour step back to be able to take a 2 week leap forward the next day is it's figuring that out early on. And I used to do that a lot. I used to kind of get caught up in no, but I'm working really hard and not actually take stock of how I'm working, if I'm working effectively, efficiently, if I'm working to the best. And I used to do that a lot. And it used to basically and what would happen a lot, because I invest a lot in what I do, and I give a shit about what I do. So I'd get into roles where there'd be big old chunky hairy challenges, and I would be like putting in lots and lots and lots of hours and not taking stock of my own physical health, mental health, whether or not I'm working efficiently, effectively. Like it was just work really hard and just do it for a long time, and everything will work out. And it was only when I started sort of taking that step back and sort of going, no, well, look, again, if I can take 1 day step back in order to make a 1 month leap forward the next day, that's surely a much better approach than just going really, really hard for a month. So there's that. And then look, the other biggest mistake sort of ties back to the previous point. I'm probably one of my biggest flaws is probably that I'm brutally honest. I don't tend to sugarcoat. And one of the biggest mistakes was early on allowing myself to sort of sink into playing the game. Early in my career, and it was very early in my career. I managed to kind of gain the, enough confidence in myself to call a spade and not sugarcoat and tackle things and have the hard discussions head on. But I do still remember early on and actually feeling quite down on myself for allowing myself to do that. Like realizing that I'm not doing myself any favors. I'm probably not doing the business I was working for at the time any favors, the people around me any favors by just playing the game. So the biggest mistake is probably just succumbing to that pressure of just kind of play whatever the political or organizational game is that's being played, and don't just do what you think is the right thing to do. So that's probably a second one. So maybe two different layers. Drive. I'm petrified of failure. Like genuinely petrified of it. As in, it's the kind of thing, if I think that something's going to fail, it's under my watch, it's the kind of thing that will keep me awake. It's the kind of thing that will bother me for a long time. And it could be the simplest thing. It's probably another growth area for me, if I'm honest. The idea of failing on something super small is magnified in my mind. But oddly, even though it's an area for growth and an area for development for me, I also think it's a massive driver as well, and a motivator to just keep pushing, keep driving hard. And then as you sort of you hit some of your successes and you hit some of those the finish lines on some of the things you're doing, and you can look back and you go, wow, that was kind of cool. Maybe I can do that again, and we could do it bigger. And then you keep challenging yourself to do it. So the drive, the motivation, the continuous challenge is really cool. But yeah, there's an area for growth there of maybe not beating myself up so much if I fail along the way. But yeah, as it is right now, one of my biggest drivers has been an absolute deep fear of failure. So, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure I fail as little as possible. And as I've got older, I have learned to take my failures as learnings and learning opportunities, and I do genuinely do that, and I try and be very mindful of that. But still petrified of it.